Hey guys, my name is Dina Marie Rodriguez. I am a full-time illustrator and hand lettering artist in Portland, Oregon, and this is Women of Illustration, a brand new web series that features amazing, talented women from all over the globe so that way we can help each other be heard more in this male-dominated industry that we're in to be able to just make insanely good art and get paid for it. Today is the last episode of a 3-part series with Irene Feleo, an amazing illustrator and animator out of Brooklyn, New York. We're going to be talking about how do you find your niche as an illustrator. So we know the best ways to practice. We know how to find our unique style, but we need to talk about more than just what's the kind of subject matter that we're drawn to, what's the colors that we use most often, and what are the mediums. But what are the services? What do we have as artists to offer to the world so we can get paid for it? How do we talk to clients so they can perfectly understand the value we offer, especially if they're not an artist or a designer themselves? How can we speak to someone who has no idea about the art industry in a way where they can just get it? All right, are you guys ready for the episode? Me too. Let's find our illustration niche. Ho! Okay, so here's a great question, I think, is when did you begin to feel as though you're producing work in your own authentic style?
So I think maybe, even when I first started drawing, like in high school, because I've like all of us, I've always drawn like all throughout high school. I've always kind of had my own stamp on things just because I guess I wasn't very much a technical illustrator. I can't draw very technically well. We touched on that like in past episodes. So I kind of always tried to do things my way. And if anything, I've always tried to be like people that are more technical. Like I remember I went through a phase where I was obsessed with Pixar because I wanted to be an animator and I wanted to draw like Disney. And so I would try and draw like concept art to look like Disney concept artists, and I just can't do it. Like I've never been able to do it. So I've always definitely felt like my work has always looked like my work, but I feel like only recently, maybe in the past maybe 4 years, I've started to feel like I've refined it to a point where it looks developed enough to look commercial or refined, like it looks proper rather than half hashed out. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Would you say that you figured out your style like before you had your day job, like your first official like paying gig, or did it come after like years in the industry, working professionally?
Um, I mean, the thing is that people have always said that they can tell what my work is. Like, even though I do like a lot of different things, like I'll draw like girl heads, or I'll draw creatures, or I'll draw plants and stuff like that. People have always been like, "Oh, like I recognize your style," and I'll be like, "That's great." Like, I don't know if I have a style, but people have always said that they can kind of tell that it's come from me. And I think that's just a mixture of one, the subject matter that I gravitate towards, the colors that I use, and the feelings that I try to evoke with my work, which is what I talked about before, like whimsical, strange, odd. So I can explore like a whole breadth of different things, but as long as those kind of things are there, people identify that as my style. So that's what kind of always been there.
Oh, that's
You know what I mean?
crazy. That's
Yeah.
a crazy way. Like, did that happen to me?
Yeah.
I don't even know.
Like I don't think I'm really like flattered when people say that they can tell my work has a distinct style.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it means the world to me because I'm like, great, like someone thinks that, it's like when someone says they recognize you and you've only met them once. You're like, that's amazing that you remember me. Like yeah, I don't know. I think it's just a combination of the colors that I use, the subject matter, and the strange kind of things that I like to gravitate towards.
Yeah. So something that just popped in my head. So I can only think of this in terms of like a lettering perspective. So like when you first start out lettering, it's very like I've gotten to the point where by looking at your lettering artwork, I can tell you how long you've been practicing. Because I feel like everyone looks exactly the same when they first start out. Like when we were looking at Scott Baresack's Instagram profile back in the other episode together. And that was the one on The Right Way to Practice. But like his first style looked exactly like mine when I first started. So I feel like there's a little bit of talent. Like you need to have talent in order for you to recognize it as style, or else it just looks like everybody else's shit, like literal shit. Would you agree with that, or do you think people can have a style starting out?
I don't know. I remember I listened to this amazing quote from Ira Glass. I don't know if you've heard it from This American Life.
Mm-hmm.
He was like saying how like, you know, it's when you first start doing anything, I'm like horribly misquoting him, but the concept is there. Like
Mm-hmm.
that when you first start doing creative work, you are going to do work that sucks. And you're going to know it sucks and it's going to be super frustrating. But the reason why you know it is because you have taste. And a lot of the reason why you got into the game is because you have taste. And so you're able to work towards building that. So I don't really 100% remember the question, but
But you
like
totally answered it. Yeah,
yeah,
no.
like my point is that like when you start, you know, there can be like elements of what will be your style in there, but I feel like you'll be able to like if you look at it and you're like this is shit,
Mm.
then you can tell that because you have taste and you are working towards a goal. Whereas like if you do something and it's terrible and you're like this is pretty sweet, then we've got problems because I don't know if you can necessarily teach taste.
So, okay, so I have this kind of like spiel that I go into and like how to find your niche. But before I go into it, what would your advice be for someone who's trying to like I'll give you a scenario. They've been practicing for over 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
on a plethora of illustration that may or may not include lettering. They haven't really figured out what colors they enjoy or any of that stuff, but they're really trying to focus now and be more professional. Maybe they have a couple thousand followers on Instagram. They're starting to get some traction, but they haven't figured out their niche yet. And now there's a difference between niche and style. So just to be really clear, style can be associated with like the aesthetic, where like the niche has to do a lot more with like industry and services. So like
Mm-hmm.
when you're ready to offer up your your services with your art, what would you do? So like what would be your advice?
Um, so for example, when you say services and part, like for example, would mine be animation?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Um, I guess so style figuring out. My number one advice would be to probably just look at what like figure out what you enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I really had an eye and also enjoyed animation. And so that's kind of where the majority of my illustration work gravitated towards. Like I could draw characters, I could make explainer videos, I could, you know, do all of that kind of stuff. And so I really looked at that industry and figured out, okay, like where do I fit into this? But also on top of that, I would always kind of I always get a bit bored. I'm not gonna lie. Like I kind
Yeah.
of always jump from place to place. So while I do animation in my day job and I do offer that as a service, if I were to freelance, I'm so happy to explore other opportunities. So, you know, I went through a stint of doing murals because I was like, oh, like, you know, I feel like I would enjoy seeing my work in large spaces.
Yeah.
And I did enjoy seeing my work in large spaces, but I also realized that I hate going outside. I am a sucker for the elements. Like I painting in the sun is the worst thing in the entire world. Painting in
Mm.
the cold is the worst thing in the entire world. So I hate like doing murals. Like it's just not really my thing. So I like this is a lot like our past advice is just, you know, trial and error, figuring out what you want to do and like what you're interested in and then doing it. And then if you don't like it, that's totally fine. And if you do, keep working at it, work in the community and figure it out.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what I would say. I think only because I'm a teacher, you have to break things down, like really
Yes.
segment them to really get the point across. So I'm going to ask you a series of questions that I think should
Ooh.
make up your niche, all right? And you've already answered it, but just to put it all together. So the first thing is industry. Okay, so if you had to pick your top two or number one industry to work in, like apparel, lifestyle brands, fucking automotive, that kind of thing, beauty, editorial. There's so many other options. What are like? What would be your dream?
So is like animation one of that, or because
Animation's a service.
that's your
Like
service?
industry could be like entertainment. So like, and
Yeah,
then within,
entertainment.
so like within entertainment, you could even segment it to like, I only like to do things for documentaries because that would
Yeah.
still be like so. So entertainment is a great example, but like if you had to, okay, so using entertainment, what are your favorite kinds of entertainment that you would like to create for? Just so we can super segment it down.
Yeah, no worries. So like, for at the moment, I work in advertising that sells products. But I would ideally like to work in entertainment where I focus on telling stories visually. So I would like to, whether that means I work on creating short films or creating longer content pieces that tell brand stories or like concepts behind that. That's what I would really like to get into.
Now I'm going to drill this down to a ridiculous amount. Okay, so telling
I would.
stories. So, do you have a preference on autobiography? Like, is that more of like a biography or is it more of like fiction?
Um, well, I think like a lot of fiction is based on true stories. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, I would like fiction, but I also like a mix of both. For example, at the moment, I'm working on a short animation for a film series called Project Girl, and they're all film series like they're 10 stories, and they're all based on true stories of like stories from girlhood that were anonymously shared. So it's a fiction story that was written, but it was inspired by a true story.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's like the really great middle ground. And I'm conveying that story through animation, which is like kind of really interesting because I can kind of let my imagination run wild, but it's still grounded by a very personal experience.
So we went. So if we were to narrow it down, your ideal industry, let's just say storytelling, especially fiction within the entertainment industry.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
absolutely.
these are the things that I want people to talk about. So it's kind of like I forget who said this. It's probably Sean West. I feel like everything I say at one time was something that Sean West said. But like you have to drill down the why. Like just keep asking why. So it's like okay, so you choose the entertainment industry. Why did you choose the entertainment industry? Because I like storytelling. Well, why do you like storytelling?
That process is really good. And to be honest, I've like never really necessarily done it to myself. Um, but it's a really good way to kind of like check in and be like, am I heading down the right path? Like, because I'm still emerging, like I'm still figuring
For
out what I'm
sure.
doing. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea.
Oh, so there's more. Okay, so we
Oh,
figured out our industry. Now let's talk about medium.
okay.
Okay, so if you had to pick one medium and that could be a specific program, what would that be?
Photoshop.
Photoshop? Okay,
Yeah.
so does that mean you're animating in Photoshop or are we talking static illustration?
Static and also 2D animating. But if I had to pick a second program to go with that, I pick After Effects.
Okay, so we can say Photoshop and After. So let's say Adobe Suite.
Yeah.
So that way it's not like Cinema 4D or anything like that.
Yeah.
And just going into, so we could say Photoshop. Now, in terms of mediums, are there certain kind of brushes that you gravitate towards? Do you like more traditional looking brushes or do you like more glossy brushes?
Yeah, so I like the ones that, look like watercolor. That was like the number one thing that I used to be obsessed at. I've actually gone away from the whole watercolor look. I now so more so do like shading, whether it be through like the speckled brushes or like dry brushes. I do a lot of paint backs, like so I'll get I usually just use the standard Photoshop brushes,
Mm-hmm.
but I play with the flow and the opacity to kind of give it like a kind of rugged texture to it. So I think that's kind of what I gravitate towards.
Okay, so let's combine them, right? So industry. So you like to work in the entertainment industry, especially for fiction, using digital products such as Photoshop and After Effects that have a more traditional vibe.
Yeah, a
So
bit of a contradiction. Like,
no, it's not because I'm the same way. Like I use like I think I only use one brush. It's like Micron 0.5 brush that I
yeah,
bought from a kit. That there's like hundreds of other fucking brushes. That's just the one
yeah,
brush I use.
yeah,
And then
like this one.
I use like the blue pencil brush for sketches just because it's nice to have color that's not gray. Okay, so there's more. The next one is subject matter. Now that's the one thing that you talked about when I asked you about style versus medium or industry. So that's
Yeah,
really interesting. So you're gonna stick with kind of I don't know, whimsical, right? So you
yeah.
have that pretty much down. If you had to actually talk about what are the common themes of your work? So like before you said sometimes you did the floating heads, sometimes you did the plants. Is there one thing that you always see in your work that's pretty consistent?
Yeah, I think all my work kind of has like an element of magic in it. And I mean magic in the sense like it's not really grounded in reality. That's
Mm-hmm.
hence the floating heads, hence the floating hands. I draw a lot of plants, but I think plants can be used in potions. Like, I don't know, I've always gravitated to that kind of imagery. Like, knives, like a floating eye. I just think there's like an element of the surreal that I really gravitate towards, and I think that's what makes it whimsical and strange.
Okay. So that you used a really good word that you didn't use before, which is surrealism. All right. So let's go back.
Yeah.
You like to do, you like to be in the entertainment industry doing fiction, right? So doing things that are strange or, things that like might surprise you, using digital products, but for a more traditional feel. And you would like subject matters that are really just kind of weird and surreal and witchy and all that stuff. So that's a pretty focused niche. Now there's one more. Yeah, like this is what I like. Folks at home, are you writing this shit down? Like, answer these questions. Like, it's going to be amazing. So that way, next time you have a conversation with someone, you can feel brave enough and practiced enough to be able to actually tell them what you do.
Yeah.
Because it's really hard to tell someone what you do when you're an illustrator or an artist of any kind. Because it's not a blanket statement. Not all artists are created equal. And there's different fucking things you can do in your industry, as we all know, and be able to paint a picture. And if you can talk about what you do to what I'm going to say normie. I don't know if that's offensive or not. Like a normal person. So like a normie, if you're telling them what you, and they actually get it, that's fucking amazing, because the majority of your clients aren't going to get it either. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, totally.
just being able to speak on their level. Okay. Last thing is services. So animation is a service. So if you had to pick just one or two services, what would those services be?
Um,
An illustration's not a service.
is not a service.
No.
Animation's not I mean, but animation is a service?
Yes. So illustrations, like, it technically is a service, but it's really, I guess the same thing as animation. It's a really broad. So like a service, like within illustration could be like branding, editorial, apparel, advertising, those social media graphics, like really breaking down to like a keyword searchable term.
Yeah. Okay. I guess I've always wanted to get into editorial. I've never actually done, I have done like portraits of artists, like music artists to accompany blog things. So if I could pick a niche, I'd definitely pick like animation and editorial, because the idea of like accompanying a visual with the written word is exactly like kind of my steez.
Would you say advertising for animation and editorial for illustration?
Say it again, sorry.
I'm such a teacher. Would you say because animation and illustration are such big umbrellas? Would you say for animation it would be advertising, and then for illustration it would be editorial? If you had to pick one niche service underneath the umbrella of those two things.
I mean, ideally, animation would be entertainment, though, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. So entertainment. I forgot.
Yeah. I mean, I do currently do animation in advertising, but the dream would definitely be to do things that are story based rather than something that's driving to like sell consumer products. Advertising.
Totally. All right. So we put all those things together, and that's essentially what your about page should say. And even more so, that's what the first line on your website should say when people land on it. Because a really general statement is, "Hi, my name is so-and-so. I am located here, and I'm a designer."
Yeah.
So
that's exactly what my thing is.
Yeah, which is actually really bad, because your name is the only specific search item in that entire thing. Designer, you're not going to pop up on the first page of Google for designer. You're just not. And for New York, maybe. So when you say something like, now long tail keywords and run on sentences, I'm actually a really big fan of. So it's like, "Hi, my name is Irene Feleo. I'm a New York based animator and illustrator that specializes in whimsical and witchy designs, that entertain and teach you something about someone's story or make someone's story come to life." You know what I mean? Isn't that much more of like, I really get what you do. So that way
it's very specific. Yeah.
Yeah. So that way, if a normal person, I feel like normie is racist. I don't know why I think that. Like, how is that? Okay. What did Harry Potter, what did he call people who didn't have magic? Muggles. Okay. So when you're talking to a muggle, because I didn't coin that term, so I feel like I'm allowed to use it. It's like, sorry, people who don't know magic, not to be racist. Damn it. But yeah, so that way when you're talking to a muggle, they understand what you mean.
Yeah.
So isn't that cool?
That's amazing. And I also think it helps like kind of target, because even when we were just doing that whole exercise, right? I don't even necessarily do what those things are, but already you have said it perfectly, like how, like what I can be communicating to other people to get what I want to eventually work in.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like that, like those are the areas that I want to work in. But by just introducing myself to people and potential clients as I'm an illustrator, it's going to take a lot more to get to that.
Exactly. So once you figure out your niche, you're just able to better dictate what you're available for. So it's like, I would say it like this to my students. I have 2 portfolios, both equally talented, both have a really great style. But this person has specific things in their portfolio that have hand lettered t-shirts in them. This person only has a few hand lettering projects, but it's mostly they're like a jack of trades, they're doing design, they're doing animation, but nothing for t-shirts. I'm going to hire this person over this person because this person has less risk. This person is more likely to complete the job on time, on budget, and I won't have to hire another designer. This person has less of a proven track record from what I can see on their website. Even though they totally could have this in their portfolio, if I can't see it, it doesn't exist. So for everyone who's like, I haven't updated my website in 2 years, I feel you.
Yeah.
Update it.
Yeah.
Fucking
absolutely.
Update that shit. Squarespace, something easy, just do it. Even if it's just a picture. Like, just whatever. And that's my spiel on pretty much like how to find your niche. And I feel like it's a nice way to like organize it a little bit better. It's just really just like asking yourself questions.
Yeah, no, I think that's like I've actually been like meaning to do that for ages because like for now, like, you know, I've always been able to illustrate, and animation is slowly becoming a skill that's starting to level with that. But yeah, that's super interesting. I'm like, oh man, I need to rewrite my bio.
Maybe that could be your challenge.
Game on.
Yeah.
Challenge accepted.
Yay! So this 3-part series, I've like thought of like at least 10 or 12 challenges, but none of them that I was like, no, I feel like that wouldn't like affect your bottom line. I don't want to do that because for me, like you're not the kind of person that I feel like has a confidence issue or has a problem posting or practicing, but talking about yourself in a way that people can understand. Yes, 100%, and it will make a difference. Not only for how people can have an easier time understanding what you're saying, but hey, think about those long tail keywords. Make believe time. Okay, so you're a budding artist. You didn't go to college. You never had a creative job, and you're starting to get some traction on your Instagram, right? And you haven't figured out your style yet, so you get an inquiry. And the inquiry is for you to not necessarily do something that's in your own wheelhouse, but something just like, oh, you draw. This is a drawing aesthetic I like. Please draw this aesthetic. Would you A, try to make that aesthetic your own? Or B, just do whatever the client wants?
I've been in that position before, for sure. When I was starting out, I would get heaps of inquiries like that and briefs. And yeah, I would definitely just kind of do what the client told me. I never kind of wanted to make it my own because I didn't necessarily know what my own was at the time. And I didn't know, like, for example, I always knew that I liked to draw characters, but then I would get briefs of people being like, hey, can you draw this product, like a car? And so that sounded really boring to me, but I would do it anyway because I gotta eat, I gotta make money, and I also thought that
Why? We lost her!
I'm sorry, I think my internet just lost connection.
Yeah, that's okay. I was just like, did your computer die? And I think we've all been in that position, especially when it comes to like rent. Like rent is coming. But I think I come from such a like, now that I've done so many things wrong with my career, if I would have done it over, I still would have gone to college. I still would have gone to Full Sail. I wish they would have had an illustration program because it was such a strict school that I have such good, the word I'm looking for is strengths. I'm going to say strengths from that school. Like I'm really, and also like I was this close to joining the military. So I just was always like very attracted. I know.
Yeah.
I was also a stand-up comedian in another life. There's all these
I can see
things.
that. I can
Yep.
definitely see
See,
that.
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
A lot of poop jokes, a lot of toilet humor. Oh yeah, and like lots of like doing weird dance moves. It was great. It was mostly
No, I
like to
love
get
that.
free drinks because I was poor, and I was like, if you're a comedian, you get free drinks. I was like, oh, well,
Too
that sounds
easy.
great. So coming from a strict background, if I could do it all over again, I would have not had a design career. I would have worked at a coffee shop or a pet store, like my first job, and then had my bills taken care of, and then kind of started doing freelance and only worked on projects I knew I wanted to do more of,
Hmm.
which I think is key. I'm gonna say it again. Only doing projects I wanted to do more of, because then if I'm doing work that I'm not proud of, my portfolio quickly becomes projects that I'm only going to get more inquiries to do more of that.
Yeah.
So that's why I think it's important before you put your portfolio out there, don't necessarily put your student work, especially if the prompt is very common, like creating a poster out of typography. Don't fucking put that on your fucking portfolio. Everyone does that. Or like modeling a cell phone or something stupid.
Or
Don't.
tutorials, like
Yeah.
tutorials. Don't put that on.
Don't put that. If you make so that's why I think it's always better to like do it that way, and then the commercial work you do you're proud of and you put your portfolio, or do whatever the fuck you want and just do a lot of personal projects that look real, and then you get more of what works. So either one of those. So when like having the dilemma now, obviously as a professional, if someone asked me to do something that was like out of my wheelhouse to a point where I don't feel comfortable, and because I don't want to have to give you a refund based on my lack to do my job, I do have a liability clause, but still, um, I would just say no. And I think no is like the most important word.
Hmm.
But when you're a beginner, I feel like because of the whole scarcity mindset, we tend to take on things we wouldn't necessarily do. But I do agree with the whole like full priced or free. So it's
Yeah.
like not necessarily discounting your work, but like if you have a client, I know I'm getting like crazy off topic, but I'm trying to like cover a lot of stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Is when you price something out and someone's like, "Can I have a discount?" No, you can only ever reduce the scope of the project, like less work, less hours, less usage rights, whatever. And again, if you're like usage rights, we have a video about usage rights coming on up with Shauna, which I think you guys will like. Penchesen, in case you're like, who's Shauna? We're supposed to know who Shauna is. Shauna Penchesen, super cool, a lettering artist lady. Anyways, so that way you're just not compromising yourself. Because again, I feel like we really have to protect our passion and not give it away, and not have like little bits of our heart turned to stone before we're actually doing what we love, or else it gets tainted and then you end up at a dead end job that you hate because the thing that you thought you loved got ruined by your own bad decisions.
You know, and I think this happens a lot when you're starting out, is like you like the idea of something, and you like to draw, so you're like, oh, like I could do that. So I think like my number one rule is trial and error. 100% I agree with you. Like later on in your career, like now I am very comfortable saying no to things that are just not a priority in terms of the scope of work that I want to be doing. Like for example, back in like when I lived in Sydney, I wanted to be exhibiting a lot more in galleries and exhibitions. So I said yes to pretty much every invitation that came my way. I sent emails asking if I could be in certain exhibitions, but now it's just not a priority. My priority is like solely working on building my animation, and storytelling skills. So I think that's like an evolving thing, and just kind of always being on track of like where you want to be and what you can learn from each experience is a big thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so do you think it's confusing to your audience if your style changes?
Um, that's something I guess I've always worried about, but if it is confusing, like too bad. Like I don't know.
I love
I
that.
don't
Like,
like
yeah.
yeah, like I've always yeah, like I don't know. I would really get bored if I just kind of knew that, like what gets me really excited is when I'm able to evolve from where I am. And so like if I make new work that is interesting and different, but the only way that you can kind of do that is if you keep experimenting and exploring. So yeah, I guess it is something that I've always worried about, but I there's no way to avoid it. And like that's why I'm so stoked every time people are like, I can really tell that this is your style, even though like you seem to do a lot of different things. And I'm like, great, like, I'm not losing the audience. But yeah, if it did confuse them, and if that somehow meant that they couldn't tell that it was me, then I guess that would just kind of change the nature of the art, like me as an artist, which is fine. Like, yeah, I think it's important to kind of keep what I like doing at the forefront rather than, whether my audience is able to track my work.
Yeah. No, that's great. I'm glad that you have that perspective. I think, like, if I could offer any advice in the subject is do a slow evolution if you can, which is going to happen naturally. So just make sure you stay consistent posting. It only gets really confusing when someone takes, like, a break for, like, a summer or, like, a few months, and then they come back and something's completely different. And you might just get a bunch of unfollows because people are like, who the fuck is this? Especially if you also change your profile picture.
Yeah.
At the same time of changing your style. That's my only, like, little, especially if you have, like, hundreds of thousands of followers, or you finally hit that 1,000, you really don't want to go backwards. Other than that, like, changing your style, like, I recently was talking about, I went from, like, more of a black and white kind of gothic look to more of, like, I don't know, I'm gonna say sarcastic millennial vibe. But I was told just today, it's like, no, Dina, it still looks like your work. It's just a different interpretation of that work. And I was like, oh, cool.
Yeah, exactly. Like, people are going to be able to tell, like, I think that is how people see that I have a style, is because I still use those elements, specifically like visually color, but I think the vibe of my work is still the same, whether it is different or not. Because, like, for example, I guess recently I've been really drawn to illustrating like abstract things. So I work like just like blobs. I've been doing a lot of just like pattern blobs lately.
You make a lot of really pretty blobs.
Thank you. That's the nicest thing.
I love your blobs. Best blobs in the block.
Irene Feleo, maker of pretty blobs.
And she's not saying blogs. Blobs with a B.
Oh,
yeah. I make the prettiest blogs.
But yeah, but like people are like, yeah, like I can tell that's you. And yeah, I think it is important to like show the evolution, and it shows that you have range. It like, yeah, it's great. Whoa, like, where did time
It's
go?
like, I took up your whole day. I haven't eaten and I'm not even hungry. That's how cool this conversation was. Yeah.
This was really fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, you're amazing. I love you. Let's be biffles in real life. I will come to New York. You will come to Portland. We will exchange coffees.
Yes. We'll exchange. We'll buy each other a coffee, exchange it, and then drink.
Yeah. Well, like, I forget what that's called, but that thing.
You know, the fancy move. I know what you're
the fancy drink where it's like we're intimate but we're not.
Yeah.
Yeah. What were you gonna say? Something about Portland?
I was going to say, yeah, Portland. 1, want to check out the creative scene. 2, all my favorite tattoo artists live there. Yes, so I definitely need to visit.
Let's get tattoos together.
1,000 times, yes.
This is what happens. So, like, I feel like the feeling that we have right now is right when you meet someone new, right? And then you hang out for the first time and you hang out all day.
And you're just like, this is so weird.
You're like, friends that don't bother me. What? It's such a special feeling. I love you. Okay, so last final plugs. Where should people follow you on the internet? Where should people go?
They can find me on Instagram at Irene Feleo. That's Feleo. And yeah, just on my website, irenefeleo.com.
Goodbye. Farewell. Don't turn the channel, but please subscribe before you do. Your Facebook status is not that important. Bye. Wasn't that a great episode, guys? I love Irene. She's so adorable yet wise. You guys can catch more of Irene at patreon.com/women of illustration, where we are going to have a very exclusive live stream Q&A with both me and Irene to answer any follow-up questions you guys might have on trying to find your style as an illustrator. And we're also going to follow up with Irene to see how her challenge went. She gave herself a very interesting challenge of redoing her about page and talking about herself in a way that people who land on her site actually knows her value as an artist and why she would be the perfect person for their next client project. So we're going to see how she does. And I know it's going to be awesome. In next week's episode, we're going to come back with a brand new artist and a brand new series all about how to be a more independent woman in the industry. In this next episode, we're really going to focus focus on how to create your own opportunities as a woman. How can you get featured on more blogs, podcasts, shows, panels, conferences? How can you put your name out there instead of just waiting for people to find you? This is my goodbye dance. I don't want to say goodbye dance, but I'll see you next time, yeah. Bye.